I think this distinction really matters because there's a difference between using scripture to win arguments and using truth to dismantle deception in your own life. One feeds ego, right? Winning arguments. One feeds ego, the other builds freedom. If Paul walked into most churches right now, I think a lot of people would smile, shake his hand, and completely miss what he's actually saying. Because Paul wasn't writing cute encouragement notes from mugs and wall art. He was writing like a man who knew he was being watched, not by people, by something else. And here's the part that gets me. We live in a time where everybody feels the pressure, but nobody can agree on the source. Anxiety is up, attention spans are cooked, families are strained, people are angry for reasons they can't even explain. And lately, you've probably noticed this too. The weird stuff isn't staying in the shadows anymore, and the paranormal is mainstream. Conspiracy talk is dinner table talk in a lot of families. And spiritual language is showing up in places it never used to. So today on Broadcasting Seeds, we're going to talk about spiritual weapons in Paul's letters without doing the surface level thing. Not the motivational poster version. We're going to dig into the real version and the kind that makes you sit back and go, wait, if this is true, then a lot of what I've been calling normal life might actually be a battlefield with better marketing. If Paul's right, then the war isn't coming, it's already here. And the scariest part is you can lose it while thinking you're just having a rough week. Right now, it's not just bad vibes. It's not just stress. It's like there's a coordinated drag on the soul, a low grade fog that makes you tired, reactive, numb, and distracted. And if you've ever had one of those moments where you snap at someone that you love, then later you're sitting there thinking, well, why did I do that? That wasn't even me. You already know what I'm talking about. This week, we're staying inside Paul's world. This is the second episode of Paul 2. But we're also going to connect it to ours. We're talking about strongholds and spiritual resistance and mental intrusion and what it looks like when a believer actually picks up the tools Paul talks about and uses them like they're real, because they're real. And ignoring them isn't neutral. That's just expensive, folks. It's expensive for you and your soul. The enemy's favorite move isn't possession. It's permission. Get you to agree with a lie and you'll police your own prison. Bottom line. And just so you know, this isn't going to be a spooky Christian campfire story episode. It's going to be grounded and practical, a little unsettling in the right ways. If you're the kind of person who's been sensing that something is off in the atmosphere lately, I'm just telling you that you're not crazy. You might just be early. Before we go deeper, quick favor, because this is how the show grows. If you get value out of Broadcasting Seeds, I'd l I love you to like, share, and leave a review wherever you listen. Seriously, I can't even express to you that the reviews and shares, that's the oxygen for a show like this. And one more thing, send this episode to a friend who keeps saying, "I don't know what's going on lately, but something feels off." You guys have heard this ad nauseam. Um, all right, you ready? Section 1. Strongholds aren't metaphors. Let me hit you with something uncomfortable. When Paul talks about tearing down strongholds, he's not talking about bad habits. He's talking about literal fortified positions. We've kind of hit this hard over the last week, 2 weeks with altars and things like this. Think about that. A stronghold isn't a passing thought. And it's not just a bad mood. It's not, I had a tough childhood, because so many of us have. A stronghold is something that has moved in, set up walls, installed security, and started charging rent in your brain, in your head, in your heart. And here's where spiritual weapons in Paul's letters get interesting, because Paul describes arguments, lofty opinions, and ideas that exalt themselves against truth, like their military installations, right? Um, that's strong language. He's saying thoughts can become structures, and structures can become territories. We don't fall apart overnight, folks. You get fortified against truth, one agreement at a time. Right now, uh, powerful narratives I'm talking about, algorithms shape beliefs, headlines shape outrage, repetition shapes identity. Say something long enough and it becomes obvious, but obvious to who and based on what? You see this with news anchors over and over and over. Everyone's seen these videos. That's what I'm talking about. Mindless repetition. Strongholds form the same way. You experience pain, a lie offers relief, you agree with it. I'm not enough. People always leave. God's distant. Nothing changes. It feels protective, right? It feels smart. It feels, realistic. But what if that thought didn't originate with you in your head? And I'm not saying every intrusion idea is a demon whispering in your ear. That's not what this is. Let's stay grounded, okay? But Paul clearly believed there were unseen influences operating through ideas, and he's not the only one. Not horns and pitchforks, ideas, cultural currents, intellectual pride, and internal accusations. Lately, the phrase spiritual warfare, um, it gets tossed around like it's dramatic language, even by me. I'm guilty. But Paul roots it in the mind. It's absolutely rooted in the mind, not theatrics, not spooky manifestations. The battlefield, the battlefield is interpretation. How you interpret failure and conflict, and how you interpret silence, and how you interpret suffering. That's where strongholds, they just lock right in. And here's the part that gets personal, folks. Have you ever tried to pray and it feels like hitting static? Like your thoughts are loud, but your spirit feels quiet. That friction might not be God being distant. It might be a fortified belief system filtering everything before it reaches your heart. This is real. The most dangerous prison is the one that convinces you it's just your personality. I promise. Paul says the weapons aren't of the flesh, meaning you don't uh, yell your way out of a stronghold and you don't hustle your way out. You don't self-help your way out either. You dismantle lies with truth applied consistently over time. This is not a one-click fix. And that sounds simple until you try it, right? Because tearing down a stronghold feels like so destabilizing. It's destabilizing your own identity. It feels like losing control. It feels like stepping into open ground without any cover, meaning you have nothing to hide behind. My military folks, people that have watched war movies get it, which is why most people don't do it. But here's the nudge forward. It's my Cass Sunstein nudge forward. If strongholds are real, and Paul is right about spiritual weapons in his letters being capable of demolishing them, then ignoring this isn't neutral. It means something else keeps building. And once you see that, I'm telling you that you can't unsee it. Ready to go deeper? Section 2, the army is awareness. And here's where things get a little sharper. When Paul describes spiritual weapons, it doesn't start with offense. He starts with armor. I just talked about this with somebody in an episode. That's not random. Armor assumes contact and it assumes pressure. It assumes something is already pushing back. And if you felt that heaviness, the mental noise, the straight up spiritual fatigue, you're not imagining it, folks. I'm telling you, you're not. And right now, distraction feels strategic. Attention is absolutely currency nowadays, and outrage is monetized. Confusion spreads faster than clarity could ever imagine, and the more chaotic things get in our culturally, the more unstable people feel internally. Paul calls that out before the internet even existed. It wasn't even a thought in anyone's mind. Truth as a belt, righteousness as a breastplate, faith as a shield, salvation as a helmet. He's not handing out medieval cosplay here, folks. He's mapping psychological and spiritual resilience. Think about the helmet for a second. The helmet. If salvation guards the mind, what happens when someone forgets who they are? I mean, it's identity erosion, right? You see it everywhere, people reshaping themselves based on trends and political swings and cultural waves. One month they're confident, the next month they're unraveling. Why is that? Why? Because their sense of self, it's not anchored. It's freaking negotiated daily with something. And if you don't guard your mind, something else will rent it. Period. Faith as a shield. This one's interesting. A shield isn't passive. You actually raise it. It's active trust. It's choosing not to internalize every accusation, every headline, every fear projection. I had this happen lately too. Lately, fear mongering is absolutely constant. Economic collapse, war rumors. I mean, look at Iran, um, among other things. Social division. We've never been more divided. Catastrophe cycles. Some of it is legitimate, of course. Absolutely. Some of it is amplified, but all of it hits the nervous system. Okay. Faith interprets the automatic spiral, not blind denial, grounded trust, and righteousness as a breastplate. That's integrity. Living aligned. Because hidden compromise creates cracks. And if we're just talking to ourselves and compromising, you're leaving open cracks, not doors, but cracks. And cracks are where pressure seeps in. You ever notice how guilt distorts perception? When you're out of alignment, even neutral situations feel threatening. Armor closes those gaps. You got to put it on, though. The uncomfortable question. What if most spiritual exhaustion isn't from fighting too much, but from not wearing what protects you? Think about that. People burn out spiritually because they're trying to swing swords without guarding their minds. They're arguing online. They're debating theology, consuming conspiracy threads constantly, diving into strange phenomena, but they're not anchored. They're not protected. And this matters for broadcasting seeds listeners. It just does. We talk about strange phenomena and we talk about cryptids and government cover-ups, biblical threads, high strangeness. That curiosity is healthy, okay? But without armor, curiosity can become destabilizing. Curiosity without discernment doesn't wake you up. It opens you up. I was just talking about this on the previous episode with the guests. This week, especially with everything people are talking about culturally and war, and it's easy to pull, Epstein, and it's easy to get pulled sideways. And Paul's framework pulls you vertical. Armor first, awareness first, identity first, then engagement. It's not that difficult. Because if you're not protected, every idea feels like revelation. And that leads exactly where we're going next. Section 3, the sword is not what you think. So now we're going to pivot. Because when people hear about spiritual weapons, they immediately think offense, power, authority, casting things out, rebuking the darkness. But Paul only names one offensive weapon, and that's the sword. The sword. And it's not volume. That's not personality. It's not even dominance. Okay. The sword is the word. It's the word. That sounds churchy until you slow down and ask what that actually means. Okay. A sword is precise. It's close range. It requires discipline to use. You don't flail with the sword. And if you do, you get hurt and you get tired really fast. Didn't we just talk about this? So why does Paul describe the word that way? Because truth applied specifically cuts through specific lies, not general inspiration, specific truth. Right now, we live in an era of broad statements and vague, I mean, at best, vague spirituality. Live your truth. How many times do you hear that nonsense? Manifest your reality. Speak your world into existence. It sounds empowering, right? It feels mystical. Bottom line is, though, it's foggy. Paul's framework is the opposite of foggy. It's targeted. When Jesus was tempted in the wilderness, we're in Lent right now, guys. This is where it happened. We're in the middle of Lent. He didn't argue philosophy. He answered distortion with anchored truth. That's sword work. That's sword play and sword work. And here's where this gets, I guess, unsettling. If you don't know what's true, you don't know what to cut at. You don't know what to cut. A dull sword doesn't defend you. It just makes noise. We always hear that term, iron sharpens iron. Lately, people are starting to notice how easily narratives shift. Headlines contradict themselves and cultural values flip. Institutions rebrand truth in real time. And if you're not grounded, you start adapting to every wave. That's not discernment. That's just drift. The sword requires familiarity. Gosh, I can't say that. You can't borrow someone else's conviction in a moment of pressure. You can't Google spiritual clarity or ChatGPT spiritual clarity in a crisis and expect it to land. You have to internalize this before the moment. And this connects to everything we talk about on the show, on Broadcasting Seeds. When we explore conspiracy or the paranormal or strange phenomenon, hidden history, there's a temptation to chase revelation after revelation. But without a fixed anchor, that appetite becomes endless. You start needing bigger mysteries and bigger shocks. It's like, man, this is just patterns. We talk about that all the time. You need bigger secrets and bigger conspiracies. That's not awakening. That's addiction to intensity. Not every hidden thing is meant to be hunted. Some are meant to test your hunger. Where does that come from? Paul's emphasis on the word as a sword implies restraint. It implies you don't swing at everything. You cut what needs cutting. So, with that being said, internal accusation, false identity, fear spirals, distorted theology, hopeless narratives. And notice something else. He doesn't say the sword is your he doesn't say the sword is your opinion about scripture. He says it's the word activated by the Spirit. That's relational. That's discernment. That's alignment. And right now in this culture, when spiritual language is being repackaged into self-empowerment systems, I think this distinction really matters because there's a difference between using scripture to win arguments and using truth to dismantle deception in your own life. One feeds ego, right? Winning arguments. One feeds ego, the other builds freedom. And that brings us to the final layer. Because armor protects, the sword cuts, But there's one more weapon Paul elevates that most people overlook completely. That's next. The weapon most people ignore. So let's close this Sunday spiritual set rep by talking about the one weapon people skip. Okay. And it's actually pretty simple. Not easy, but simple. And that is prayer. Not the rushed kind, not the help me fix this kind, not the emergency hotline version. Okay. The sustained kind. And when Paul outlines spiritual weapons in his letters, he ends with prayer like it's oxygen, not flashy, not dramatic, but absolutely essential. And that should tell you something because armor is visible. The sword is obviously dramatic, but prayer is quiet, which is exactly why it gets neglected. Right now, we live in a culture that rewards reaction. Post it, respond to it, argue it, analyze it, react fast, react loud, react publicly. Prayer moves in the opposite direction, slow and intentional and aligned. If the war is spiritual, which it is, then silence might be your strongest strategy. People are getting burned out. Even believers, especially believers, they're tired mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and they're doing all the visible things, right? Listening to podcasts, watching breakdowns, debating theology, consuming content. But are they cultivating their alignment? Prayer isn't about informing God. It's about stabilizing you. It's about you. When Paul says pray at all times, he's not suggesting religious muttering. He's describing constant awareness, constant calibration, and a refusal to let your interior world drift without correction. Because drift, it's silent, it's subtle. Drift feels normal. Drift feels justified. It even feels like growth sometimes, right? Until you look back and realize you're miles off course. You don't wake up deceived. You wake up slowly adjusted. And this is where it gets personal. If you felt pressure lately, not just stress, but pressure, maybe the answer isn't more information. Maybe you need to get aligned. It's alignment, folks. Maybe it's putting the armor back on, sharpening the sword with precision this time, and committing to prayer like it's strategic, not sentimental. I pray. I can't even tell you how many times a day. This week, especially, as conversations around culture, instability, and belief systems keep intensifying, because it's going to, I promise you. Don't just observe the battlefield. I want you to prepare. And if this episode on spiritual weapons in Paul's letters helps you see something clearer, do me a favor. Well, first off, I will put in all the links for you to check this stuff out, to follow the instructions on how to put on the armor of God. Okay. But do me a favor and like it, share it, leave a review. That's how Broadcasting Seeds grows. That's how this message reaches the person who doesn't even know they're in a fight yet. Send this to a friend who keeps saying they feel drained, but can't explain why. And again, if you're a researcher, a theologian, investigator, or creator working in the space where biblical threads meets strange phenomenon and cultural analysis, I, I'd really love you to reach out. Let's build something grounded. No hype, no theatrics, just clarity. Because here's the truth. The war isn't hype. It's not entertainment. It's not content. It's influence. And influence is happening right now. This has been your Sunday spiritual sit rep on Broadcasting Seeds. Stay sharp, stay anchored,
don't you?
and stay awake. Have a good day.
Pressure with no fingerprints. War with no headlines. Something pushing. And you don't know what. I wake up heavy. No bruises on my skin, just static in my thinking. Like something settling in. No chains, no sirens. No demons in the hall, just little compromises. Till I barely stand at all. You call it stress, you call it fate, you call it something you can medicate. But I can feel it closing gates. It don't scream, it don't bleed. It just plants a subtle seed and watches what I start to believe. You build a fortress in my mind, brick by brick with every lie. Try to crown my fear as king, try to blur what's wrong and right. But I am not defenseless, I am not alone. I've got truth strapped to my waist and the fire in my bones. You whisper softer than my own regret. You turn my doubt into a throne and call it intellect. You feed the anger, you starve the lie. You twist the silence in the dark till wrong begins to feel like right. No horns, no flames, just culture dressed in holy names, playing psychological games. It don't roar, it don't chase, it just occupies the space till I forget who I became. You build a fortress in my mind, brick by brick with every lie. Try to crown my fear as king, try to blur what's wrong and right. But I am not defenseless, I am not alone. I've got faith raised like a shield and a fire in my bones. Tear it down, every thought that drags me down. Cut it loose, cut it clean. Every lie I let between. Guard my head, guard my chest. No more compromise, dressed up as rest. This war ain't loud, this war is near, and it's been breathing in my air. You build a fortress in my mind, but